So first shot, I'm gonna go give a speech right now. My car is right over there. It's pretty damn tight in this parking garage. And anyhow, a lot of effort, a lot of bullshit, but gotta do what you gotta do. Good day, everybody. Now, last week when I spoke here, I made the statement that the correct view to hold about your brothers and sisters who are suffering is to assume that they are innocent. This view entails that their suffering is unjust and that our assistance is required. Last night, I woke up at midnight reflecting upon this idea and began thinking many thoughts related to what I am calling the right perspective. I realized that I would need to write an article entitled The Right Perspective, which would go into more detail about the full perspective that we need to embrace. And shortly after, I knew that I would need to give that speech today as well. Now, before getting into it, I'm a little afraid that I might make a mistake, so I thought if I just did something stupid, it would just make me a little more comfortable. So I'm just going to practice my wolf call, okay? Ahoo! Anybody else want to try? Oh my God, you're not going to help me save the world, are you? Oh no. Can't do a wolf call. We're in big trouble. Okay. So the prevailing assumption in spiritual matters is that everyone needs to decide for themselves what the truth is. And let me make this very clear. That is 100% wrong. Truth is not subjective. It is objective. If you're dedicated to learning the truth, and you succeed in doing so, you have certainly arrived at the truth in your own way, but it is much like ascending to the peak of a mountain in that it is verifiable for anyone who reaches the summit. Your path will be different from others, to be sure, and your experience of the summit will be different as well. And in that sense, you have a subjective experience which gives rise to your own creative means of expressing the truth. Yet there is no disagreement to be had about the terrain below. Now, I'll be making a series of statements describing the right perspective and offering brief commentary on a few, since there's a whole bunch. I think there's like 26 or 27. So get ready. First one, I'm going to hit you over the head. The right perspective is that the world is an abomination. And that may seem pretty heavy to some, but that is the truth. It's a right perspective, and we'll explore that as we go a little bit here. The right perspective is that a loving God would have no involvement in the creation of this mess we are in. And there's no way to reconcile a loving God with this. There must be some kind of evil force involved, and there's no explanation other than that which has any explaining power whatsoever. And believe me, I've heard them all. The right perspective is that suffering in any form, in any location, is completely intolerable. You don't allow your family to suffer, standing by. Why is it okay anywhere else? The right perspective is that if even one individual is screaming for mercy somewhere, the entire world is invalidated by that person alone. When I say invalidated, I mean that the whole basis, the whole foundation is shaken. If one person even has the possibility, I would go so far as to suffer, the entire thing is invalidated by that alone. For the most part, we have relegated suffering to background noise. I used to live next to a highway of an interstate, and I got used to the sound of the cars after a while. Now, some of you might be familiar with Stalin's quote. He said that a single death is a tragedy, yet a million is a statistic. And for the most part, his words describe us perfectly, in that it's become so prevalent that we don't even notice. It's just the natural state of affairs, as insane as it is. The right perspective is that our work will not be done until everyone who is willing to be helped receives it, and that all helpless and innocent beings are removed from the threat of danger. The right perspective is that no cosmic event will occur to shift the world, and if anything, we will be the agent that triggers the cosmic event. A lot of people are talking about a solar flash occurring. I think this occurred in a nearby star a couple years ago, Proxima B or something, in which there was a giant flash with this star, and they're predicting that the sun is going to do the same thing. And if you look at history, a guy named David Wilcock did a very good explanation of the different cultures that have this idea about the sun having a massive solar event. The right perspective is that there is nothing outside of the decision of us, which means you and me, which has real power, putting it squarely on our shoulders. The right perspective is that support of dominant ideas and institutions without proper investigation is the ultimate laziness. And so here I'm saying laziness is a function of mind, not body. Sometimes the body follows a lazy mind and becomes a lazy body as well, but laziness is a function of mind and our thinking. The right perspective is that excess wealth spent on luxury is a sin when people are sick, hungry, and homeless. We've made it okay in this culture to spoil ourselves, and it's not okay. The right perspective is that all forms of spiritual materialism are false, and that material wealth in no way validates your spiritual maturation. And if you think it's about manifesting mansions and boats and that kind of thing, you're dead wrong. The right perspective is that all forms of mainstream culture are not culture at all, but are anti-culture, is what I call it, which is wiping away true culture all over the world. So technology is a double-edged sword because it allows us to communicate instantly and over vast distances. However, it's also responsible for the prevalence of this anti-culture, what I call it. The strip malls, the McDonald's, all that kind of crap, pop music. The right perspective is that excess time spent on mainstream anti-culture, which includes shopping malls, Facebook, pop music, the news, idiotic TV shows, most movies, and traveling to tropical resorts, is not okay, but in fact supports insanity, evil, and degradation of life. Now, these things can be used positively if you have the right perspective, but there is no such thing as being neutral in this world. If you don't choose liberation, if you don't choose heaven, you are by default choosing hell. The right perspective is that our spiritual teachers have almost entirely failed us, although most did not intentionally attempt to mislead us. But this is actually really good news because they've all been wrong, and that's why we're up, what the name of that creek, you know it very well. The right perspective is that liberation from darkness does not depend on blind faith, but on deep convictions supported by rational thought. This is rational. This is not whimsical. This is not fantastical thinking. Rational thought. Very important here. The right perspective is that you are a spiritual being, not merely having a human experience, but are here to invalidate the world as it is and use your energy to end this nightmare once and for all. The right perspective is not that the world is a mud ball floating around in infinite and eternal black space, but is a mass hallucination we are sharing. Entertain that one for a moment. The right perspective is not that there are many dimensions, but there is simply heaven and hell, and within heaven, there are unlimited experiences to be had, and within hell, there are seemingly infinite pathways which all lead to nowhere. The right perspective is that God does not intervene because we are the agents of transformation, and God's will must be done through us. If God is love and God could do something, he would, or she would. The right perspective is that spiritual maturation is evidenced by one becoming a practical visionary, which means a deep conviction that the world can be liberated quickly by using means which appeal to our common sense. The right perspective is that all so-called spiritual experience which does not lead one to becoming a practical visionary, which I just defined, is just time idly spent. The right perspective is that relational dysfunction is our greatest problem, and that transformation will be impossible if it is not the primary thing we address. So here I'm stating what the problem is, and therein lies the solution as well. The right perspective is that consciousness can only expand if our constellation of relationships is healthy, and that attempting to expand it via individual means has no relevance at all anymore, which means all things like meditation, yoga, all the stuff we call spiritual is just a bunch of BS basically right now. Relationships is the way. The right perspective is that happy and healthy is the natural state, and that people who are not completely happy and healthy are not to be judged, but are to be supported, which means everyone needs to be supported. The right perspective is that beauty is to be our guide in creating a world worth living in, and that anything that serves a valid purpose can be aesthetically designed. So no pure functionality, like this room is just purely functional, no aesthetics whatsoever. The right perspective is that the world can only be transformed by embodying the way of heaven, which is to say light, joyful, spontaneous, fun, rational, beautiful, and imaginative. All of those things, and probably a bunch more as well. So the way of heaven is also the way to heaven. And you could also reverse that and say the way to heaven is the way of heaven. We've got to embody the way to get there. The right perspective is that the world can be liberated from darkness very quickly. And I stand by the time period when I proclaim that it can be done in 100 days. Not years, 100 days. The right perspective is that the world cannot undergo any major type of bifurcation event, which means a split, two worlds coming apart basically, people going one way, some people going another, until the truth has been made available to everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, I make these statements with no reservation. These are not beliefs of mine, they are the truth. It matters not if 7.4 billion people all say I'm wrong. The power of the truth is in its consistency, its practicality, and how it strengthens with time. The truth is not based on story, but on principle. If you choose to ascend the mountain, you will see what I see. If you choose to allow me to show you the shortcut, I will gladly do so. In conclusion, I'm not offering you a mere point of view. I am giving you the right perspective. Amen. So I just finished that speech, and now I'm at a little cemetery in downtown Pittsburgh. Really cool place. There's two churches, one this way, a little view at the top, and then one over here as well. Both really beautiful churches. See ya.